The storm broke on the fifth day, revealing a landscape transformed. Pristine snow stretched to the horizon, sculpted into otherworldly formations by the relentless wind. The sky cleared to a pale lavender hue, and twin suns emerged from behind distant mountains, casting the world in golden light. Marcus stood at the observation window, making notes on his tablet about the storm's aftermath. Vexra watched him work, still marveling at the change in her perspective. In just 5 days, this human had dismantled beliefs she had held for a lifetime, not through argument or force, but through simple acts of kindness and respect. "The conditions are safe enough now to check on your ship," Marcus said, setting aside his tablet, "though I'm not optimistic about its condition." Vexra nodded, her thoughts conflicted. Part of her, the part still loyal to Teslian principles, insisted that she should focus on repairing the vessel, on continuing her journey away from Dominion space. Yet another part, one growing stronger by the day, wondered if perhaps their crash landing had been not a catastrophe but an opportunity. "I should assess the damage," she agreed, "though I lack the technical expertise for major repairs." "I have some engineering training," Marcus offered. "Not specific to your vessel, obviously, but I might be able to help." Iria came bounding into the room, her eyes bright with excitement. "Can I come too? I want to see what the storm did to everything." Vexra couldn't help but smile at her daughter's enthusiasm. Another change. Before their time here, she would have reminded Iria of the need for warrior-like stoicism. Now, she found herself charmed by the child's exuberance. "You may come," she said, "but you must stay close. The temperature remains dangerous." They set out in the rover, Iria pressed against the window in fascination as they traveled across the transformed landscape. Marcus navigated with practiced ease, following the transponder signal from the downed ship. When they arrived, Vexra's hopes sank. The vessel was barely recognizable, half buried in snow and ice, its hull breached in multiple places. Even to her untrained eye, it was clearly beyond repair. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly as they surveyed the damage. "The ship's spaceframe is compromised. It won't fly again." Vexra nodded, accepting this reality with a warrior's pragmatism. "Then we must consider alternatives." They salvaged what they could, personal items, data cores, communications equipment, before returning to the outpost. As they worked, Vexra noticed Marcus's mood shifting, becoming more introspective, almost withdrawn. That evening, after Iria had gone to sleep, Marcus approached Vexra with an unexpected proposition. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began, his expression serious. "There's a supply ship scheduled to arrive in 3 weeks. It could take you and Iria to the nearest outpost with regular transport." Vexra studied him, sensing there was more to his suggestion than mere logistics. "And from there?" "That would be up to you." Marcus hesitated, then continued. "But there's another option. My research contract here runs for another 10 months. If you wanted, you and Iria could stay until then. When my rotation ends, we could all leave together." The offer hung between them, its implications clear. This wasn't just about shelter or transportation. It was about possibility, about a future neither of them had anticipated. "You would take responsibility for fugitives?" Vexra asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I would welcome companions," Marcus corrected, "and help with my research. This planet has secrets that would benefit from your warrior's perspective." Vexra was about to respond when a signal alert sounded from the communications console. Marcus frowned, moving quickly to check the incoming transmission. "It's encrypted," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "And it's using Teslian protocols." Vexra's body tensed, warrior instincts flaring. "They've found us." Marcus looked at her, uncertainty in his eyes. "Should I block it?" "No," she decided after a moment. "We must know what we face." The message decrypted to reveal a familiar face, Commander Calix, her former second-in-command, and one of the few she had trusted with her escape plans. "Vexra," the recorded message began, "if you receive this, know that circumstances have changed. The Archon is dead, assassinated by those loyal to the old ways. The new leadership has denounced the child conscription programs and declared amnesty for those who fled them." Calix's expression remained stoic, but Vexra could read the subtle signs of emotion. "You are no longer considered a traitor. You and your daughter may return without fear of punishment. The Dominion needs leaders who understand that strength comes in many forms." The message ended, leaving them in stunned silence. Vexra replayed it twice more, scrutinizing every word, every expression for deception. But Calix had always been loyal to her, and his words rang true. "What does this mean?" Marcus finally asked, his voice carefully composed. "It means we have a choice," Vexra replied, her mind racing. "Return to Teslia and help shape a new future for our people, or—" She left the alternative unspoken, her eyes meeting his. "Or stay here," Marcus finished for her, "at least for a while." Vexra moved to the window, gazing out at the now calm landscape. The beauty of this harsh world had begun to impress itself upon her, its clean simplicity, its honest challenges. And beyond the physical environment, there was this human who had shown her a different way of being, a different kind of strength. "The Dominion is changing," she said slowly. "Perhaps because of actions like mine. If I return, I could help guide that change, ensure it benefits children like Iria." Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You'd be a powerful voice for reform." "Yes," she agreed, "but—" She hesitated, unfamiliar emotions making it difficult to articulate her thoughts. "But," Marcus prompted gently. "But I am not the same warrior who left Teslia," Vexra admitted. "What I have learned here, about compassion, about connection, it would be difficult to return to a world that does not value these things." Marcus moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. "Maybe that's exactly why you should return, to bring those values back with you." His selflessness struck her deeply. He was encouraging her to leave, to do what was right for her people, even though she could see in his eyes that he wished for another outcome. "What if," Vexra said carefully, "we did not choose immediately? What if we used your supply ship to send a message to Calix, to learn more about these changes before making a decision?" Hope flickered across Marcus's face. "That would be sensible." "And in the meantime, Iria and I could assist with your research," she continued. "She has never known such freedom as she has found here. It would be educational for her." "And for you?" Marcus asked, his voice soft. Vexra found herself doing something rare. She smiled, a full expression that transformed her usually stern features. "For me as well. I have much still to learn about this human concept of vulnerability as strength." Marcus returned her smile, relief evident in his posture. "I'm a pretty good teacher." "So I have discovered," Vexra replied, closing the distance between them. This time, when she kissed him, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only the quiet acknowledgement that some connections transcend the boundaries of worlds and cultures. Later, as they lay together watching the aurora dance across the night sky through the observatory dome, Vexra thought about the strange path that had brought her to this moment. She had been raised to believe that strength meant standing alone, that compassion was weakness, that vulnerability was failure. Yet here, in the arms of a being from another world, she had discovered a different truth. That true strength sometimes meant accepting help, that compassion could be the most powerful force in the universe, and that in vulnerability there was a kind of courage she had never before imagined. Whatever choice they ultimately made, to return to Teslia or to forge a new path together, Vexra knew that the storm had changed her forever. Like the landscape outside, she had been transformed, reshaped into something new and unexpected. And as Iria's delighted laughter echoed from the next room, where she was experimenting with the food synthesizer, Vexra realized that perhaps this was the greatest gift she could give her daughter. Not the warrior's path of isolation and duty, but this new understanding of connection and compassion. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her emerald skin. "About warmth," Vexra replied, "and how it can be found in the most unlikely places." Vexra K. Aldorum tightened her thermal cloak around her shoulders as the alien wind howled outside their damaged spacecraft. Her emerald skin had taken on a paler hue in the frigid temperature, and the orange-red filaments that served as her hair had stiffened with frost despite being inside the ship. The pointed ears that extended horizontally from her temples twitched nervously as she monitored the life support systems. They were failing rapidly. "Mama, I'm cold," whispered Iria, her daughter of 7 cycles. The child's wide amber eyes reflected the dim emergency lighting as she huddled against a bulkhead wrapped in all the thermal blankets Vexra could salvage. "Warriors of the Teslian Dominion do not complain about discomfort," Vexra replied automatically, though her tone lacked the harshness her own mother would have used. She immediately regretted the words when she saw Iria's ears droop. Softening, she added, "But yes, it is very cold. The auxiliary power will not last much longer. The crash landing had been violent but survivable. Their small vessel had been caught in an unexpected gravitational anomaly while passing through this uncharted system. Now they were stranded on a planet covered in ice and snow, with a storm approaching that the ship's damaged sensors warned would be catastrophic. Vexra had been raised in the warrior caste, where displaying weakness meant demotion or worse. Compassion was considered a liability, a distraction from one's duty to the Dominion. But motherhood had changed something fundamental within her, a change that had made her an outsider among her own kind, ultimately leading to this desperate attempt to find sanctuary in the outer reaches. "We cannot stay here," Vexra decided, gathering their emergency supplies. "The ship's shell is compromised. We must find natural shelter before the storm intensifies." As she helped Iria don her protective gear, Vexra glanced at the planet's atmospheric readings once more. Remarkably breathable but dangerously cold for their species. They would have perhaps 6 hours before hypothermia set in, even with thermal gear. "Are there monsters outside?" Iria asked, her small clawed hands clutching Vexra's arm. "No, little warrior, just ice and wind." Vexra strapped the emergency beacon to her belt. It was programmed with standard distress frequencies, but the likelihood of anyone finding them in this desolate region seemed impossibly small. They stepped out into the blinding whiteness, the wind immediately cutting through their protective clothing. Vexra scanned the horizon and spotted a rocky outcropping about 2 kilometers away. It wasn't ideal, but it might provide shelter from the worst of the wind. "We will make for those rocks," she told Iria, lifting the child onto her back. "Hold tightly." 40 kilometers away, in a reinforced research station nestled between glacier-carved valleys, Marcus Adami frowned at his monitoring equipment. The atmospheric sensors had detected a small aerial detonation and subsequent impact approximately 2 hours earlier. Now, they were picking up an artificial signal, faint but unmistakably non-natural. "Computer, can you identify the signal pattern?" he asked, pulling up a more detailed analysis. "Signal contains elements consistent with distress beacons, but utilizes unknown protocols," the station's AI responded. "Triangulation places source approximately 41.7 kilometers northeast of current position." Marcus ran a hand over his close-cropped hair, considering his options. He was 6 months into his 2-year research assignment, studying climatic patterns on this remote world. The nearest human outpost was 3 weeks away at sublight speeds. He checked the weather forecast and felt his stomach tighten. The approaching storm was a Category 5 polar tempest, among the worst he'd recorded in his time here. "Computer, how long until the storm reaches the signal source?" "Approximately 4 hours until leading edge, full force in 6 hours." Marcus glanced at the specialized snow rover in the station's garage bay. It could handle the terrain and had emergency medical supplies, but venturing out with that storm approaching was exceedingly dangerous. Then again, whoever had crashed might have no idea what was coming. His mind made up, Marcus began pulling on his extreme weather gear. "Computer, prepare the rover for extended rescue operation, and keep tracking that signal. I want continuous updates to my headset." "Warning, recommended safety protocols advise against travel during imminent Category 5 storm conditions." "Noted," Marcus replied, securing his thermal boots. "But someone's out there who won't survive without help." As he finished prepping the rover, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever he might find would change everything. The research station had been lonely these past months, with only automated supply drops and occasional communications from Earth for company. He'd chosen the isolation deliberately after what happened at the Europa colony, seeking quiet and distance from human connections. Now, as he guided the rover out into the growing wind, Marcus wondered if he was rushing toward the very thing he'd been running from: responsibility for other lives. The rover's headlights cut through the swirling snow as he pressed forward, following the mysterious signal into the heart of the gathering storm. The blizzard intensified with frightening speed. Vexra struggled forward, her feet sinking into deepening snow with each step. The rocky outcropping that had seemed so close now appeared as just a shadow through the whiteout conditions. Iria clung to her back, the child's warmth fatting against her spine, a realization that sent panic through Vexra's normally disciplined mind. "Stay awake, little warrior," she called over her shoulder, her words nearly lost in the howling wind. Tell me again about the crystal forests of Teslia. Iria's voice came weakly. The crystals sing when the three moons align. Mama, I'm so tired. You must not sleep, Vexra insisted, her own limbs growing heavy. The cold was penetrating deeper than she'd anticipated, affecting her species' natural heat regulation. Warriors of the Dominion endure. We are... She stumbled, nearly dropping to her knees before catching herself. The rocks still seemed impossibly distant. For the first time in her life, Vexra contemplated failure, true failure, not just setback. On Teslia, failure meant disgrace. Here, it meant death for both her and her daughter. The thought of Iria's light being extinguished from the universe was unacceptable. Ancestors, guide us, she whispered, a prayer she had not uttered since childhood. It was then that she heard it, a mechanical rumble, faint but growing louder. At first, she thought it was the storm playing tricks on her senses. Then, through the curtain of white, she saw lights approaching. Vexra's warrior instincts flared. She gently set Iria down behind her and drew her ceremonial blade, the only weapon she'd managed to salvage from their ship. Whatever was approaching could be hostile. Many frontier worlds had automated defense systems designed to eliminate any unregistered landings. The rumbling grew louder, and suddenly a large vehicle emerged from the storm, its lights illuminating Vexra's defensive stance. The vehicle halted, and a figure emerged, encased in bulky protective gear. Vexra tensed, ready to defend her child to her last breath. The figure approached slowly, hands raised in what appeared to be a universal gesture of peace. "Hello, do you understand me?" a male voice called out. Vexra's universal translator, embedded beneath her left ear, processed the sounds. "I understand," she replied, not lowering her blade. "Who are you? What world is this?" "My name is Marcus Adami. I'm a climate researcher from Earth. This planet is designated KOI 4878F, but I call it Niflheim." The figure pointed to the small form behind Vexra. "Your child needs immediate medical attention. Please let me help you both." Vexra hesitated. In her culture, accepting help was acknowledging weakness, and trusting an unknown entity was foolishness. Yet Iria's life hung in the balance. "Mama," Iria's voice was barely audible now. "I can't feel my fingers." Decision made, Vexra lowered her blade. "If you harm her, your death will be slow," she warned. Marcus nodded, seemingly unfazed by the threat. "Let's get you both to my rover. This storm is just getting started." He approached carefully and knelt beside Iria. Vexra watched intently as he examined her daughter with gentle efficiency, then wrapped her in what appeared to be a reflective emergency blanket. "Her core temperature is dangerously low," Marcus said, his voice tight with concern. "We need to move quickly." To Vexra's surprise, he lifted Iria with careful tenderness, cradling her small form against his chest. The action was so unexpected that Vexra found herself momentarily stunned. In Teslian society, the strong did not burden themselves with the weak, yet this stranger was doing exactly that. They trudged to the rover, Marcus breaking trail through the deepening snow. Inside the vehicle, blessed warmth enveloped them as Marcus activated additional heating systems. He placed Iria on a padded bench and began applying warming packs to her core and extremities. "The outpost is about 40 kilometers from here," he explained, his focus entirely on Iria's well-being. "I've got medical supplies there. Can you tell me about your physiology? Anything I should know to help her?" Vexra, still wary but recognizing the genuine concern in his voice, provided the essential information about Teslian biology: their higher normal body temperature, sensitivity to cold, the importance of keeping the cranial ridges warm to prevent neural damage. As Marcus worked, Vexra observed him closely. His movements were precise yet gentle, his eyes focused with determination behind his protective goggles. There was something in his demeanor that she found unfamiliar, a quality that went beyond mere competence. "Why did you come?" she asked abruptly as he finished stabilizing Iria. "You risk your life in this storm for strangers, enemies, perhaps." Marcus glanced up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. They were a deep brown, warm despite the frigid world around them. "Because you needed help," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "I picked up your distress signal. I couldn't just ignore it." "In my world, such actions would be considered foolish," Vexra said, her voice holding no judgment, only curiosity. And in mine, they're considered human, Marcus replied, securing Iria for transport before moving to the driver's position. Hold on, the ride back will be rough with this storm. As the rover lurched forward into the white expanse, Vexra found herself contemplating this strange contradiction. A being who would risk everything for those who offered nothing in return. It defied all the principles she had been raised to value. Yet as she watched him navigate the treacherous terrain with unwavering focus, occasionally glancing back to check on Iria, something unfamiliar stirred within her. Perhaps there was strength in this behavior she did not yet understand. For now, though, all that mattered was that her daughter would live. And for that, she owed this human a debt, another concept that would have been shameful in her former life. The storm raged around them as they pressed on through the gathering darkness, 3 lives now bound together by circumstance and a stranger's inexplicable kindness. The research outpost emerged from the blizzard like a mirage, a series of interconnected domes and low structures, reinforced against the planet's extreme conditions. As Marcus guided the rover into a pressurized garage bay, Vexra felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The last time she had been at another's mercy was during her warrior initiation, and those memories were not pleasant. The main living quarters are through here, Marcus said, lifting Iria carefully. The medical bay is small but should have what we need. Vexra followed, taking in the surroundings with tactical precision. The outpost was clearly designed for efficiency rather than comfort, though compared to the brutal architecture of Teslian military installations, it seemed almost luxurious. Warm light suffused the space, and the air carried unfamiliar but not unpleasant scents. The medical bay was a compact room with a single examination table and walls lined with equipment. Marcus laid Iria down gently and began working with practiced movements, connecting monitors and preparing treatments. Your daughter is stable but suffering from hypothermia and minor frostbite on her extremities, he explained, studying displays that Vexra couldn't decipher. Her body temperature is rising slowly. I'm administering an oxygen-rich mixture to help with cellular repair. Vexra stood rigidly nearby, fighting the urge to intervene to take control of her daughter's care. Will she recover fully? I believe so, Marcus replied, injecting something into Iria's arm. Teslian physiology isn't in my database, but I've had medical training for xenobiological emergencies. From what you've told me, she's responding well. Vexra nodded stiffly. The Dominion trains us to endure extreme conditions, but children are more vulnerable. She has not yet completed her physical conditioning. Marcus looked up, his expression unreadable behind his protective mask, which he had not yet removed. She's just a child. She is a warrior in training, Vexra corrected, though something in his tone made her words sound hollow to her own ears. Several hours passed as Marcus monitored Iria's condition. The child remained unconscious but stable, her breathing becoming stronger, her color improving. Eventually, Marcus sighed with relief. She's out of danger, he announced. She'll likely sleep through the night, but her vitals are stabilizing. Only then did he remove his protective gear, revealing a face that Vexra studied with curiosity. His skin was a rich brown, his features strong yet gentle somehow. Those eyes that had seemed warm even through goggles were even more expressive now, currently showing exhaustion but also satisfaction. You should rest as well, he told Vexra. I've prepared quarters for you next to the medical bay. There's a sonic shower and fresh clothing that might fit, though it's designed for human physiology. Vexra realized she had been awake for nearly 30 hours. On Teslia, such endurance would be commonplace during training exercises, but here, in the relative safety of the outpost, her body's demands could no longer be ignored. I will remain with my daughter, she insisted. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. I'll bring you something to eat then. You need to regain your strength. When he returned with a tray of food, simple but nourishing, Vexra found herself unexpectedly touched by the gesture. In her world, care was functional, never personal. Yet this human had shown more consideration in hours than she had experienced in years among her own kind. You have not asked what brings us to this system, she said as he checked Iria's monitors one last time. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready, Marcus replied. Everyone has their reasons for being on the frontier. The simplicity of his response disarmed her. No demands, no interrogation, just acceptance. We are fugitives of a sort, Vexra admitted. I defied my commanding officer to save Iria from conscription. She was to be sent to the front lines of our conflict with the Braxian Collective. At 7 cycles, she would have been the youngest ever deployed. Marcus's expression darkened. They send children to war. The Dominion believes in early conditioning. Those who survive become exceptional warriors. Vexra's voice was matter-of-fact, though she recognized how it must sound to an outsider. I was 9 cycles when I first took a life in battle. Silence fell between them, filled only by the steady beeping of monitors and the howling wind outside. Marcus seemed to be processing her words, his face a complex mixture of emotions that Vexra couldn't quite interpret. What made you decide to leave? He finally asked, his voice soft. Vexra looked at her sleeping daughter, remembering the moment that had changed everything. Iria has a gift for healing. Even untrained, she can sense injuries, help mend them. The Dominion wanted to weaponize that ability, teach her to reverse it to cause cellular breakdown rather than repair. She met Marcus's gaze directly. I could not allow that. Marcus nodded slowly. You did what any parent would do, protect your child. Not on Teslia, Vexra replied. There I committed treason. If captured, we would both face execution. The storm outside intensified, rattling the outpost's reinforced walls. The sound seemed to underscore the gravity of her words. Well, Marcus said after a moment, you're safe here at least until the storm passes, and that could be days according to my readings. He showed her how to use the monitoring equipment and explained the emergency protocol should anything change with Iria's condition. Then, with obvious reluctance, he prepared to leave them for the night. At the doorway, he paused. For what it's worth, Vexra, I think what you did was incredibly brave. Not just surviving the crash or the storm, but choosing your daughter over everything you've known. The words struck Vexra with unexpected force. In her culture, her actions would be seen as weakness, as sentimentality overriding duty. Yet this human saw strength in her choice, a perspective so foreign that it left her momentarily speechless. Thank you, she finally managed, the phrase unfamiliar on her tongue, for your assistance and your understanding. After Marcus left, Vexra settled into a chair beside Iria's bed, her hand resting lightly on her daughter's smaller one. Outside, the blizzard raged unchecked, but within these walls, something equally powerful was beginning to stir, a realization that perhaps everything she had been taught about strength and weakness, about compassion and duty, deserved reconsideration. As sleep finally claimed her, Vexra's last thought was of Marcus's eyes, how they had looked at her without judgment, with something that in her world would be dangerously close to compassion. 3 days passed with the storm showing no signs of abating. Iria recovered quickly once her body temperature stabilized, her natural resilience asserting itself. By the 2nd day, she was exploring the outpost with cautious curiosity, her amber eyes wide as she discovered the marvels of human technology. Marcus proved to be an unexpectedly patient guide, explaining his research equipment and showing Iria how to use the food synthesizer to create approximations of Teslian cuisine. The child's initial wariness gave way to fascination, and soon she was trailing after him like a shadow, asking endless questions that he answered with remarkable patience. Vexra observed this developing dynamic with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. In Teslian society, children were treated as small adults, expected to demonstrate self-sufficiency from an early age. Marcus's gentle attentiveness to Iria's needs and interests was utterly foreign to her experience. On the evening of the 3rd day, as Iria slept soundly in the quarters they now shared, Vexra found Marcus in the observation dome. The transparent ceiling revealed swirling snow and ice, with occasional glimpses of stars when the clouds momentarily parted. The storm is reaching its peak, Marcus said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. Another day, maybe 2, before it begins to subside. Vexra moved to stand beside him, nodding how the storm's light played across his features. Your knowledge of this planet is impressive. I've been here 14 months, he replied. Studying climate patterns, atmospheric composition, geological activity. It's fascinating, really, a world that seems inhospitable but harbors remarkable adaptations. Like you, Vexra said without thinking. Marcus turned to her, a question in his expression. You have adapted to solitude, she clarified. It is not natural for humans, is it? You are social creatures. A smile touched his lips, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Some solitude is chosen. Vexra sensed a story behind those words, but did not press. Instead, she asked, "What brought you to this remote world?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I was part of a research team on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons in our solar system. There was an accident. Lives were lost." His voice grew distant. "I made a decision that saved some but not all. Afterward, I couldn't face the families of those we lost. So I volunteered for this assignment, 2 years alone with nothing but research and weather patterns." Vexra recognized the weight of guilt in his words. "You blame yourself for deaths you could not prevent." "I could have been faster, more prepared. I was the team leader." "In battle, we say that the commander who saves any lives has fulfilled their duty. Perfect victory is an illusion." Marcus glanced at her, seeming surprised by her response. "Is that the warrior philosophy?" "It is my philosophy," Vexra replied. "Perhaps I too have committed treason against my training." They stood in companionable silence, watching the storm. Vexra became acutely aware of his presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his body, the rhythm of his breathing. It was a strange intimacy, standing together in the darkness with only the storm's fury between them and the void. "Your daughter is remarkable," Marcus said finally. "She has a keen mind and a compassionate heart. That must come from you." Vexra felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Iria is exceptional. I fear I have failed her in many ways. The Dominion's training leaves little room for nurturing such qualities." "Yet she has them," Marcus pointed out, "which means you must have preserved something of yourself despite your training." The observation struck Vexra deeply. She had never considered that her small acts of maternal tenderness, hidden from her superiors, might have shaped Iria so profoundly. "Perhaps," she conceded, "though I wonder what kind of mother I might have been without the Dominion's influence." "You're the kind who risked everything to save her child," Marcus said simply. "I'd say that's the best kind there is." His words caught her off guard, and she found herself unable to respond. In the silence that followed, Marcus moved to a control panel and adjusted something. Soft music began to fill the dome, a melody unlike anything Vexra had heard before, with resonant tones that seemed to vibrate in harmony with the storm's rhythm. "Earth music," he explained. "Something called jazz. It always seemed appropriate for watching storms." Vexra listened, allowing the strange sounds to wash over her. There was something primal yet sophisticated about the composition, something that spoke to the part of her that existed beyond her training. "It is affecting," she admitted. Marcus smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his features. "That's what it's supposed to do." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared understanding that transcended their different origins. For the first time in her life, Vexra felt truly seen, not as a warrior or even as a mother, but simply as herself. "In my culture," she said softly, "vulnerability is considered weakness. Yet here with you I find myself, speaking of things I have never shared." "Perhaps vulnerability isn't weakness," Marcus suggested. "Maybe it's just another kind of courage." The concept was revolutionary to Vexra. She had been taught that strength meant impenetrability, that emotions were distractions to be overcome. Yet this human spoke of vulnerability as if it were valuable, even necessary. Without conscious decision, she reached out and touched his hand. The contact sent an unexpected surge of sensation through her. His skin was warmer than hers, the texture different yet somehow familiar. Marcus looked down at their hands, then back to her face. Something in his expression had shifted, a guardedness giving way to something more open, more vulnerable, demonstrating the very courage he had just described. "Vexra," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know what happens when this storm ends. I don't know where you'll go or what you'll face. But I want you to know that finding you in Iria, it's changed something for me." The honesty of his words pierced through her defenses. In that moment, Vexra realized that she too had been changed, not just by the rescue or the shelter he had provided, but by the simple act of being treated with compassion, with respect, with something that in her world would be dangerously close to tenderness. "I do not have words for this," she admitted, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "You don't need them," Marcus replied, his fingers gently interlacing with hers. When he leaned closer, Vexra did not retreat. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, exploratory, an exchange rather than a conquest. It was unlike anything in her experience, a connection that seemed to bypass her training and speak directly to something essential within her. The storm continued to rage outside, but within the observatory dome, something else was brewing, a tempest of emotions that neither of them had anticipated, and neither seemed willing to resist. When they finally parted, Vexra knew with certainty that whatever path lay ahead, she would never again be the warrior who had crashed on this frozen world. That version of herself had begun to thaw, revealing something both terrifying and exhilarating beneath the ice.